Part 1. The live stream. All right, people. Everybody get a good look at this face. Leo Vance shoved his iPhone right into the security guard's personal space. In the top right corner of the TikTok live feed, the viewer count was exploding by hundreds every second. 180K, 190K, 200K. The live chat was a frantic, unreadable blur. This is the guy. This is the security guard who won't let me film in Times Square. Leo's voice was sharp, pitched for maximum drama. Talking about blocking a public walkway. I'm filming the lights of New York City. This is for the culture. What does a security guard know about art? Frank Miller was 52 years old and had been a security guard in Times Square for 15 years. He wasn't a tall man, with weathered skin and a uniform that was faded from 1,000 washes but still pressed to a sharp crease. He stood there like a silent statue. A 2-inch scar on his forehead caught the lurid glow of the billboards, a faint, dark red. A memento from a drug bust on the border 20 years ago. "Sir, this is a pedestrian walkway during peak hours," Frank said, his voice low and steady. "Your tripod and lighting rig are taking up a third of the path. I've already had 3 separate groups of tourists complain to me." "Complain? Who complained? Go on, point them out." Leo spun back to his phone's camera. "You all see this? This old fossil is lying through his teeth. Times Square is huge. What's the big deal if I use this one little spot?" The chat went completely insane. "Leo, don't let him push you around. Who does this guard think he is? Dox him. Find every single thing about this guy. Now, already on the phone with building security. Filing a complaint. Look at his name tag. Frank Miller? What a boring name." Leo glanced at the comments, a thrill shooting through him. Conflict, confrontation, playing the victim, the holy trinity of viral content. He'd just been planning a generic, dazzling lights of Times Square video, but this clueless old guard had just handed him a million-view hit on a silver platter. "What's your ID number? Give me your ID." Leo practically jammed the phone's microphone in Frank's face. "I'm reporting you. I'm going to get you fired." Frank looked at the camera, then at the small crowd of young people behind Leo, his die-hard fans, who had followed him since the stream started. A girl with purple hair was the loudest of them all, shouting, "Don't be scared, Leo. We've got your back." "My ID is New York, TS 1547, Frank said, enunciating each word. "But before I accept your complaint, I need you to move your equipment. It is now 7:20 p.m. Peak tourist traffic will continue until 9. Leo suddenly laughed, a smug smirk that came from knowing he held all the power. He took 2 steps back, making sure both he and Frank were perfectly framed, then took a deep breath and yelled with the most heart-wrenching anguish he could muster. "Everyone, remember this face. Remember this ID number. We're not sleeping tonight. I want you to find out everything about this Frank Miller. His home address, his kids' schools, all of it. I'm going to make him learn what happens when you bully an honest creator." The viewer count smashed through 300,000. Digital gifts, roses, money guns, roaring lions exploded across the screen. Leo saw the real-time revenue data in his feed's backend. This single stream had already made him more than all of last month combined. Just then, Frank did something unexpected. He raised his left hand, the one where the pinky and ring fingers were visibly deformed, the knuckles twisted at a gruesome angle, and gently pressed the earpiece of his radio. "Control, this is C7. I have a live streamer obstructing the walkway. Verbal warnings have been ineffective. Recommend police involvement." Leo froze for 2 seconds. Then he burst into an exaggerated, theatrical laugh. "Cops? Ha ha. Did you guys hear that? He's gonna call the cops. Go on, do it. I'll wait." He turned back to his audience, his expression suddenly shifting to one of profound sorrow. "Do you see this? This is how the little people think. Their only answer to a problem is to call the police. He doesn't understand what era we're living in. This is the age of the internet, the age of public opinion." The purple-haired girl shrieked in agreement. "Leo's right. We are the public opinion." Frank said nothing more. He just watched this group, whose average age couldn't have been over 25, with a complex look in his eyes. There was sadness in them, a hint of pity, and a bone-deep weariness. It was a look that sent a strange jolt of unease through Leo, Not the look you'd expect from a simple security guard. A crackle came from the radio. Copy that, C7. NYPD Midtown South Precinct has been notified. Officers will be on scene in 5 minutes. Leo's face tightened. He hadn't expected him to actually do it. But then another thought struck him. Wasn't this even better content? Folks, the police are coming to arrest me. And why? Because I'm here filming the beautiful New York City skyline. Leo's voice cracked, a perfect touch of fake tears. Is this the city we live in, where any security guard can just call the cops to drag someone away? Don't cry, Leo. We're already on it. The doxing has begun. Got him. Frank Miller, 52, lives in an old apartment building in Queens. Daughter's a junior at Columbia. Student ID is... His wife is a nurse at Mount Sinai. The chat began scrolling with Frank's personal information, each line more detailed than the last. Leo scanned the text, a surge of victory in his chest. He was about to add more fuel to the fire when the stream died. It wasn't a network issue or a phone glitch. The entire channel was shut down. A single cold line of text appeared on the screen. This channel has been permanently banned for inciting harassment and violating privacy policies. Part 2. Scars and Memories. It was after 11 when Frank Miller got home. A couple of the street lights in the old Queens neighborhood were always burnt out. He climbed the 6 flights of stairs in the dark, his steps as light as a shadow. The sound of his key in the lock roused his wife, Sarah, who peered out from the bedroom. You're home. There's some hot lasagna in the oven for you. Frank nodded, taking off his uniform jacket and hanging it up carefully. On the coffee table in the living room, a photo of their daughter, Chloe, was placed prominently. Her smiling Columbia University ID picture. Next to it was an older photo, a young Frank Miller in a DEA uniform, a metal pin to his chest. Sarah brought out a plate of food, saw the exhaustion on her husband's face, and hesitated. Finally, she couldn't hold it in any longer. Frank was everything okay at work today? Everything's fine, he said, taking a bite. Just a normal shift. After 28 years of marriage, Sarah knew exactly what his everything's fine meant. She sat down quietly and turned on the TV with the remote. The local news was on. The story of a live streamer inciting his followers to dox a security guard continues to develop. Sources say the influencer, identified as Leo V, has been taken into police custody and all of his social media accounts have been suspended. The broadcast cut to footage from Times Square from that very evening. Though the faces were blurred, Sarah instantly recognized the straight-backed posture of her husband. Her hands started to tremble. Frank put down his fork and gently took his wife's hand. His deformed one was warm and surprisingly strong. It's really okay, he repeated. The police handled it quickly. But they... Sarah's voice was choked with tears. The news said they posted Chloe's university online, and my hospital, and our address. Frank, I'm scared. Frank's eyes darkened. He walked to the window and pulled back a corner of the curtain. Down below, under a streetlight, a shadow seemed to move and then disappear. It might have been nothing. His phone vibrated. It was a text from an unknown number. Frank, sorry you had to go through that tonight. Don't worry, we're handling things. Get some rest. Detective Lou, NYPD. Frank deleted the text and returned to the table. Sarah, he said softly, do you remember why I took early retirement from the DEA 20 years ago? Sarah froze. It was a topic they rarely ever touched. 1998, the Arizona border. DEA agent Frank Miller and his team were ordered to intercept a major cross-border shipment. The raid, conducted in the dead of night, went smoothly, too smoothly. As they were leading the cartel mules away, the night exploded in gunfire. These weren't just mules. It was a core transport team for a major cartel, armed with automatic weapons and grenades. The firefight lasted 17 minutes. In the agency's records, it was known as the Bloody 17. Frank remembered every detail. The weight of his partner, Dave, as he fell on top of him, shielding him from a burst of gunfire. The searing pain as shrapnel from a grenade tore through his left hand, and the cold, detached feeling as he, with his good hand, put down 3 cartel gunmen in the final moments. The mission was a success. The drugs were seized, and none of the traffickers survived. But the cost was immense. Frank's left hand was permanently damaged, and the scar was carved onto his forehead. Of the 8-man team, 3 were killed, and 2 others were crippled. I remember, Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. The day you came home, you just held me and cried all night. You said you never want to see anyone get hurt ever again. Frank nodded, raising his disfigured hand. This hand used to hold a gun. It saved lives, he said, pausing. Now all it wants to hold is a traffic wand and maintain a little bit of order in Times Square. It's pathetic, isn't it? A former DEA agent, now just some old security guard that any punk influencer can push around. It's not pathetic, Sarah said, her voice suddenly firm. Frank, you are the most honorable man I have ever known. His phone vibrated again. This time it was Chloe. Dad, are you okay? It's all over my school's online forums. Someone posted your picture, and they're saying. Chloe's voice was thick with emotion. They're saying you're some power-tripping bully. But Dad, I know you're not. Frank felt a sharp pang in his chest. Chloe, listen to me, he said, his tone impossibly calm. Go to your classes tomorrow like nothing happened. Don't read the forums, and don't reply to any messages. Trust me, this will all blow over. After hanging up, Frank sat in the living room for a long time. The clock on the wall ticked past 1 a.m. He opened an old, slow laptop, the one Chloe had used before college. It was barely functional, but it worked. He logged into an encrypted email account he hadn't touched in 5 years. There was only one unread email, sent 3 hours ago. From General Hayes, subject, saw the news. Say the word if you need anything. Frank stared at the words, his eyes burning. He typed out a reply. Sir, I can still handle it. I just never imagined that the dangers in peacetime could be harder to fight than a hail of bullets. He hit send. Outside, the city of New York never truly slept. The neon glow seeped into the dark apartment, casting shifting shadows across Frank's face. The scar on his forehead seemed to ache in the faint light. Not of physical pain, but the pain of memory. He thought of his fallen comrades, of the vicious drug traffickers, and of the order and justice he had once fought to defend. And now, the enemy he had to face was a mob of kids with smartphones and a public opinion manipulated by algorithms. Part 3. The digital execution Leo Vance spent 24 hours in a holding cell. Those 24 hours were tougher than he'd imagined. Not because of the conditions. The Midtown South Precinct was clean enough. What was unbearable was the feeling of being cut off from the world. No phone, no live stream, no fawning fans or exploding gift icons. Just 4 white walls and a silent cop checking on him every few hours. Vance, you made bail. On the 25th hour, the cell door opened. His assistant, Amy, and his lawyer were there to meet him. The expensive lawyer he kept on retainer specifically for influencer disputes. Leo, you poor thing. Amy handed him a hot coffee. It's crazy out there. Your fans are fighting for you on every platform. The hashtag #FreeLeoVance is trending. Leo's hand trembled as he took the coffee. Not from relief, but from pure excitement. He had bet correctly. A single night in jail in exchange for nationwide attention. The trade-off was more than worth it. The lawyer, Mr. Corbin, adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. Mr. Vance, the police are holding you on suspicion of disorderly conduct and invasion of privacy. But it's manageable. First, you were provoked by the security guard. Second, the doxing was done by your fans, not by your direct order. I've already prepared a statement. What about the guard? Leo interrupted. Frank Miller. What's his status? Amy and the lawyer exchanged a complicated look. Now, this part is a little weird, Amy said, lowering her voice. Normally, a regular guy getting doxed like that would have a complete meltdown. But this Frank Miller, he just went to work, finished his shift, and went home like nothing happened. And Amy swallowed hard. The NYPD's protection of him is a little over the top. Yesterday, 3 of your most extreme fans went to Times Square to confront him in person, and they were stopped by plainclothes cops before they even got close. Leo, do you think this guard has connections? Leo scoffed. A 52-year-old security guard? What kind of connections could he have? Maybe he knows a sergeant at the precinct. Don't worry. In the face of viral outrage, no connection matters. He took back his phone and powered it on. It immediately exploded with notifications. $9.99 plus unread messages, hundreds of missed calls, and a Twitter DM inbox overflowing with both hate and support. He swiped through it all, a grin spreading across his face. #FreeLeoVance was trending at number 3, with 120 million impressions. Hashtag security guard abuse of power was trending at number 7 with 80 million impressions. Hashtag Frank Miller Times Square was at number 12 with 50 million. He clicked on the last hashtag and his grin froze. The top tweet from a history blogger called NYC Remembers read, "I know a different story about the Times Square security guard, Frank Miller. 20 years ago, he wasn't a security guard. He was a hero on the front lines of the DEA, a recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross. The scar on his forehead? From cartel shrapnel. His mangled hand? From shielding his partner from a grenade. Today, the hero was doxxed and harassed by an influencer's mob for simply doing his job. What has happened to us?" At NYPD News at CNN. Attached were 2 photos. The first showed a young Frank Miller in a dress uniform, receiving his medal. The second was a current photo of him in his security uniform in Times Square, his posture as straight and unyielding as a monument. The tweet had over 100,000 retweets, 50,000 comments, and 300,000 likes. The top reply, "Respect to a true hero. Punish the cyber bullies." The second, "Leo Vance needs to be permanently banned from the internet." The third, "I'm crying. Why are the good guys always the ones who get attacked?" Leo's hands began to shake. He kept scrolling. The official NYPD News Twitter account had retweeted it, adding, "Heroes should not be forgotten, and they must not be harmed. The internet is not a lawless space." The NYPD has opened a criminal investigation into the harassment campaign against Mr. Miller. Columbia University's official account also released a statement. "Chloe Miller is an exemplary student at our university. We strongly condemn the doxing and harassment directed at her and her family and will cooperate fully with law enforcement to hold the responsible parties legally accountable." A clip from CNN's evening broadcast was going viral. The anchor spoke with grim gravity. When clicks become the only measure of worth, when facts are drowned out by manufactured outrage, are we losing our most basic respect for our heroes? Our reaction to what happened to Frank Miller should not end with anger. It must begin with reflection. The narrative had completely flipped. Leo felt a wave of dizziness. He frantically refreshed his own hashtag. Hashtag FreeLeoVance had vanished from the trending list, replaced by hashtag ThankYouFrankMiller and hashtag DeplatformLeoVance. His phone began to vibrate violently. It wasn't notifications, it was a call from his management platform. "Mr. Vance, we regret to inform you that, in accordance with our terms of service and requests from legal authorities, all of your accounts are being permanently terminated. All uncashed earnings will be frozen, pending potential civil damages. Mr. Vance, this is Brandex. Our scheduled promotional live stream for next week is canceled. As per our contract, due to personal actions resulting in brand damage, you are liable for the termination penalty." Is this Leo Vance? This is the IRS. We received a tip regarding potential tax evasion. We need you to come to our office next Monday to begin a formal audit. The calls kept coming, one after another. Leo slumped in the back of the car, his face ashen. Amy stood by helplessly, and Mr. Corbin was already quietly packing his briefcase. He knew this case was now radioactive. "Now, what do we do now?" Amy's voice was trembling. Leo suddenly snapped, slamming his fist against the car window. "That old bastard. He set me up. He had this all planned. Some hero, some DEA agent. It's all a publicity stunt. It's all." His words died in his throat. Through the car window, on the sidewalk across the street, stood a familiar figure. Frank Miller. He was in street clothes, a simple gray jacket and dark pants. He was carrying a bag of groceries, looking like he had just come from the market. He was just standing there, 60 feet away, looking at Leo in the car. There was no anger in his eyes. No triumph. No emotion at all. He just looked the way you'd look at a stranger or a piece of furniture you had to walk around. Then he turned and walked into his old brick apartment building. A chill shot up Leo's spine. He suddenly understood. From the very beginning, this old security guard had never even considered him a threat. The doxing, the mob, the screaming, to a man who had faced down death, it was all just children's games. And he, Leo Vance, was the clueless child who had started a game he could never win. Part 4. The undercurrent, the truth was, Frank Miller hadn't given Leo Vance a second thought. It wasn't arrogance. It was a matter of perspective. When you've traded bullets with cartel enforcers on the border, an influencer's online tantrum doesn't register as a real threat. But that didn't mean he was ignoring the situation. On Friday morning, Frank was off duty. He went to Mount Sinai Hospital, not for an appointment, but to see his wife, Sarah. At the nurse's station, he witnessed a chilling scene. Several young people were gathered, pointing their phones at Sarah, recording her. "Ma'am, is it true your husband is a war hero? Or is that just a story the police made up to control the narrative? We heard your daughter got special treatment from Colombia because of this. Is that true? How much does Frank Miller make a month? Do heroes get a government pension?" Sarah's face was pale, her knuckles white as she gripped the edge of the counter. Her colleagues tried to intervene, but the group claimed they were journalists with a right to ask questions. Frank walked over silently and stood in front of his wife. "I'm Frank Miller," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but the entire hallway fell silent. "You have questions, you ask me." The journalists were stunned for a moment, then grew excited. The man himself, their phones all swiveled to focus on Frank. "Mr. Miller, can you confirm you received the Distinguished Service Cross 20 years ago? Do you have proof?" Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, worn wallet. He didn't produce a police ID or a security license, but a Department of Veterans Affairs ID card. The official seal of the United States glinted under the fluorescent lights. He flipped it open to show his photo and details. Name, Frank Miller. Disability rating, 60%. Cause of injury, wounded in the line of duty during a federal law enforcement operation. Any other questions? Frank's gaze passed over each of their faces. The young people looked at each other, flustered. One, bolder than the rest, pressed on. "So, why are you a security guard now? Doesn't the country take care of its heroes?" It was a loaded, venomous question. A clumsy answer could easily be twisted into a headline. "American hero abandoned by his country." Frank was silent for a few seconds. Then he spoke. "Because I love Times Square." "What?" "I love watching the tourists taking pictures with their families. I love seeing kids running through the crowds, seeing couples holding hands under the big screens." Frank said, his voice calm and even. 20 years ago, I carried a gun to protect that. Now, I hold a traffic one to protect that. What's the difference?" He paused, then added, "And for the record, being a security guard is my choice. I have my pension and my disability benefits. The government has not let me down. Please don't use your own cynical assumptions to slander my country." After he finished, the hallway was completely quiet. The so-called journalists sheepishly lowered their phones and shuffled away. Frank helped his wife into a chair and handed her a cup of water. "Frank," Sarah's eyes were red. "I'm sorry. I'm always dragging you down." "Don't be ridiculous," he said, patting her hand. "I'm the one who should be sorry. I've put you through so much fear over the years." The head nurse came over, hesitating. "Mr. Miller, I don't know if I should mention this, but a strange package arrived at the hospital this morning. It was addressed to you. It was a plain manila envelope." Frank tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photograph. The paper had one typewritten sentence. "Agent Miller, let the past stay in the past. It's better for everyone." The photograph was 20 years old, a crime scene photo from the aftermath of the border shootout. Blood, bodies, and a young Frank Miller kneeling beside the body of his partner, weeping. On the back, written in red ink, were the words, "Do you really want your daughter to see this?" Frank's hand clenched, crumpling the paper into a tight ball. This wasn't the work of an amateur like Leo Vance. This was a professional threat. The sender knew his history, knew his deepest vulnerabilities, and their methods were clean. No fingerprints, no surveillance footage, and the return address on the package was fake. "Should we call the police?" the nurse whispered. Frank shook his head. He knew better. For a threat of this caliber, calling the police was useless. Whoever sent this was confident they had left no trail. He walked to a window, looking down at the bustling street below. New York was always so alive, so full of energy. But beneath the glittering surface, what dark currents were flowing? His phone rang. It was Detective Lou from the NYPD. "Frank, we have a development. We looked into Leo Vance's finances. In the last week, he received 3 large overseas wire transfers, totaling $50,000. The sender is a shell corporation registered in the Cayman Islands. It's a dead end. Also, Lou said, his voice low, we pulled all the surveillance footage from Times Square that night. 15 minutes before Leo started his stream, a man in a baseball cap approached him and handed him an envelope. Looked like cash. We can't get a facial ID. The guy was a pro, kept his face averted from every camera. Frank closed his eyes. The pieces were starting to connect. Leo's provocation wasn't random. $50,000 was far more than he'd make from a single viral video. The man in the hat. The threatening photo. Someone had used Leo as a pawn to destroy Frank Miller's reputation. No, not just destroy it, to silence him completely. But why? Because of that raid 20 years ago? Did some of the cartel members he fought escape? Or was it because he had accidentally stumbled onto something he wasn't supposed to know? Frank suddenly remembered something. 3 months ago, there had been a minor tourist dispute in Times Square. Two foreign men were arguing over a spot to take a selfie and almost came to blows. When Frank went to mediate, he saw a small bag of white powder fall out of one man's backpack. The man snatched it up, shot Frank a venomous look, and the pair quickly disappeared into the crowd. At the time, Frank hadn't thought much of it. Times Square was full of all kinds of people, and drug use wasn't unheard of. But he had followed procedure and reported it to his control center. He later heard that two men matching the description had been intercepted at JFK Airport half an hour later. They found 2 kilos of cocaine in their luggage. Frank had assumed the matter was closed. But now, maybe it wasn't that simple. Detective, Frank said into the phone, can you run a search for me? 2 foreign male tourists involved in a dispute in Times Square, Sector C3, around 7 p.m. on April 12th. And also, he paused. I need a list of every person who accessed the surveillance records for that incident. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Frank, what are you thinking? I'm thinking, Frank said slowly and deliberately, that Leo Vance was just a pawn. The real players who are after me might be connected to the ghosts I thought I'd buried 20 years ago. Part 5. The other side of the board in the financial district on the top floor of a skyscraper in Lower Manhattan. Marcus Thorne stared out his office window. The panoramic view stretched from the Brooklyn Bridge to the Statue of Liberty. This was some of the most expensive real estate on the planet, a testament to his power. But the man's attention was fixed on the computer monitor on his desk. It was playing a news clip of Frank Miller in the hospital hallway, showing his VA card. The video had been edited with dramatic music and a bold caption. An American hero, betrayed and harassed. Views 7 million. Likes 450,000. The comments were a tidal wave of support for Frank and vitriol for Leo Vance. Useless, Thorne spat. The man standing before his desk, Rick Gordon, flinched but kept his head bowed. Gordon was Thorne's executive assistant and his go-to-man for special projects. He was the man in the baseball cap who had given Leo Vance the envelope in Times Square. I gave you $50,000 to find an influencer and ruin a security guard, Thorne said, turning from the window, his eyes like chips of ice. And what happens? You hire an incompetent fool who not only fails, but manages to turn the old man into a national hero. Sweat beaded on Gordon's forehead. Boss, I did my research. Leo Vance had the biggest live-streaming audience in the city. His fans were fiercely loyal, and he had a history of this kind of public harassment. I thought for sure he could. You thought? Thorne laughed, a cold, humorless sound. Rick, you've been with me for 10 years. Are you still operating on what you think? I pay for results. And the result is that now this Frank Miller, far from being ruined, is a beloved hero. The NYPD is protecting him. The media is championing him. How are we supposed to touch him now? Gordon swallowed. Sir, maybe we don't have to touch him directly. The incident 3 months ago, he reported it, and our 2 couriers were arrested. But he doesn't know the bigger picture. As long as we make sure he doesn't dig any deeper. Make sure. Thorne walked to his wet bar and poured a glass of whiskey. How? By sending him threatening photos? Rick, that was an even stupider move. That's like putting up a giant neon sign that says, "We're scared of you. We want you to shut up." Do you think a man who was a decorated DEA agent is going to back down from that? The ice clinked in his glass. 20 years ago, El Gato fell because of him. Thorne's voice grew distant. That shipment was worth $30 million. El Gato was our most important partner in South America. When Frank Miller pulled that trigger, he didn't just kill El Gato. He set our entire operation back 3 years. Gordon asked cautiously, "Sir, if he's so dangerous, why didn't we deal with him sooner?" "Because it wasn't necessary," Thorne said, downing the whiskey in one go. A disabled, retired agent working as a security guard in New York? What harm could he do? Besides, the agent who handled the cleanup of that scene was one of ours. All the evidence was buried. Miller only knew the part of the story he was supposed to know. He set the glass down and returned to the window. But things are different now. Those two idiots 3 months ago nearly exposed our entire new shipping route. We cut them loose immediately. But if Miller connects the dots between what happened 20 years ago and this recent bust, if he starts to suspect that El Gato's death wasn't the end of the story, Thor didn't need to finish. Gordon understood. Frank Miller had to disappear. Not a social media cancellation, but a permanent, physical disappearance. "Sir, you mean?" Next month, on the 15th, Frank Miller's daughter, Chloe, is scheduled to take an Amtrak train from New York to Washington, D.C., for an academic conference. Thorne's voice was as cold as steel. "The Acela Express, 9 a.m. departure. Arrange an accident for her, and make sure it looks like an accident, like she was careless." Gordon's hand twitched. "Sir, she's just a college kid." "Her father is a hero," Thorne said, turning back, his eyes devoid of any warmth. "And heroes should understand one thing above all else. If you can't protect your own family, what kind of hero are you?" The office was silent save for the low hum of the air conditioning. Finally, Gordon asked in a low voice, "And Frank Miller himself?" "Deal with the daughter first. Once Miller is broken." Thorne opened a desk drawer and pulled out a sleek, custom-made knife, stroking the blade. "I'll personally send him to see El Gato. It's time to settle a 20-year-old debt." Part 6. Father and daughter Chloe knew something was wrong with her father. Ever since the online drama, he had become even more silent. But it wasn't his usual quiet strength. It was a tense, coiled silence, like a drawn bowstring, or the dead calm before a hurricane. On Friday night, Chloe came home from campus for the weekend. Over dinner, she finally had to ask, "Dad, are you hiding something from me?" The fork in Frank's hand paused. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you're not the kind of person who gets rattled by internet trolls," Chloe said, looking her father directly in the eye. "Leo Vance was arrested. The public is on your side. Everyone supports you. The whole thing should be over. But you seem heavier than before." Sarah put down her own fork, looking at her husband with concern. Frank was quiet for a long time, so long that the city lights outside filled the room, and the food on their plates grew cold. "Chloe," he finally said, "that conference in D.C. next month. Can you cancel it?" Chloe was stunned. "Why?" "My professor fought to get me that spot. Only 20 undergrads from across the country were invited. And my paper—" "You can email the paper, present it over Zoom." Frank's tone was absolute, leaving no room for argument. "But you are not going to that conference." "Dad," Chloe was exasperated. "This is huge for me. It's a major plus for my grad school applications, and it's—" I said, "You're not going?" Frank's voice rose with a severity Chloe had never heard before. The dining room fell silent. Chloe's eyes welled up. She bit her lip and stood up abruptly. "Dad, I know you're worried about me, but you've been like this my whole life. You never explain anything. You just expect me to obey. When I was little, I couldn't go out after dark. In high school, you wouldn't let me go to summer camp. Now you won't let me go to D.C. I'm not a child anymore. I have a right to know why." Sarah tried to intervene, but Frank stopped her with a raised hand. He looked at his daughter, the center of his universe. She looked so much like Sarah had at that age, but the stubborn set of her jaw was all his. It was a stubbornness that had once saved his life, but now it could get her killed. "Chloe," Frank's voice softened, "if I told you that someone wanted to hurt you, would you believe me?" Chloe stared at him. "Not like Leo Vance's online harassment," Frank continued. "I mean real, physical harm. Back when I was a DEA agent, I made some enemies. I think they might be back." The kitchen light seemed to dim. The ticking of the wall clock was suddenly loud in the silence. "Why are you only telling me this now?" Chloe's voice shook. "Because I thought it was over. I thought 20 years was long enough," Frank said with a bitter smile. I thought I could be a normal person, watch over Times Square, watch over you and your mother, and live out the rest of my life in peace. But he stood and walked to the window, parting the curtains an inch. Across the street, under a streetlight, the same black sedan was parked where it had been for the last 3 days. Someone is watching our apartment, Frank said, letting the curtain fall. They've been there for 3 days. They're not cops. Cops wouldn't be so obvious. They're not reporters. Reporters don't have that kind of patience. A chill ran down Chloe's spine. She suddenly realized that for the past few days at school, she'd had the feeling of being watched. She had dismissed it as paranoia from the doxing incident. Dad, then call the police. Chloe grabbed her father's arm. You used to be one of them, your old colleagues. I did, Frank said, patting her hand. But there's no evidence. A car parked on a public street. A few strangers walking around the neighborhood. It's not enough to open a case. And he paused. I suspect they might have someone on the inside. The drug case I reported 3 months ago. The relevant surveillance logs were accessed 3 times. The first was a legitimate request from the NYPD's Narcotics Division. The other 2 times, the user ID was encrypted with a security clearance higher than the precinct captain's. The true gravity of the situation finally hit Chloe. This wasn't simple revenge. This was a sophisticated, well-planned conspiracy. Then, what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Frank turned, his gaze resting on his wife and daughter. In that moment, he was no longer the gentle security guard, no longer the silent father. He was the man he had been 20 years ago, the DEA agent who fought for his life on the border. Chloe, you're still going to the conference, he said, his voice calm and firm. But you're not taking the train. I'm booking you a flight from LaGuardia to Reagan National. You'll leave on the morning of the 14th, a day earlier than planned. Don't tell anyone about the change. Not your professor, not your friends. Sarah, I need you to take this week off. Go visit your sister in New Jersey. Tell everyone your mother is sick and you need to care for her. What about you? Sarah cried. I can't just leave you here alone. You're not leaving me, Frank said, taking her hand. You're taking away their leverage. If I'm the only one here, they won't make a move. The target would be too obvious. He walked into the living room and opened a hidden compartment in the TV stand. He took out a metal lockbox. Inside, nestled in foam, was a well-oiled handgun and 2 magazines. Chloe gasped. Dad, how do you have a gun? It's legal. I have a permit, Frank said. His movements as he checked the firearm were frighteningly proficient. Special authorization for my retirement, because of the nature of my old cases. This is the first time I've taken it out in 20 years. He put the gun back in the box, but slipped one of the magazines into his pocket. Dad, Chloe's voice trembled. Are you going to kill someone? Frank looked at his daughter, his expression unreadable. 20 years ago, I did. To protect my team, to complete the mission. After that, I swore I would never pull a trigger again. But Chloe, he paused. If anyone tries to harm you or your mother, I will make them understand that a father's resolve to protect his family is more absolute than any law, any duty. In that moment, Chloe saw something in her father's eyes. It wasn't anger or bloodlust. It was a deep, chilling, and unbreakable determination. She knew then that some things were already in motion and could not be stopped. Part 7. Acela Express, 2151. Despite Frank's meticulous planning, the unexpected happened. Chloe, hiding it from her father, took the train anyway. It wasn't an act of defiance, but a calculated decision. If someone was truly trying to kill her, a plane felt far more dangerous. At 30,000 feet, any incident meant certain death. A train was on the ground. A train offered a chance, however slim. More importantly, she was tired of living under her father's protection. The strong back that had shielded her from the world for so long was beginning to stoop. This time, she wanted to face the danger herself. Acela Express, train number 2151, New York Penn Station to Washington, D.C. Union Station, departing at 9:00 a.m. Chloe sat in car 8, seat 12A by the window. She had deliberately chosen the busiest train, the most crowded car. It was a trick she'd learned from detective novels. An assassin would have a harder time acting with so many witnesses. The train pulled smoothly out of the station, the New York skyline receding behind them. Chloe opened her laptop, pretending to edit her paper, but her eyes were scanning everyone in the car. A few rows ahead, an elderly couple was discussing their grandson. Behind her, a group of college-age kids were playing games on their phones. Diagonally across the aisle, a man in a business suit kept checking his watch, as if waiting for something. Everything seemed normal. The train crossed into Pennsylvania, then Delaware. The view outside shifted from urban sprawl to open countryside. Chloe started to relax. Maybe her father had overreacted. Maybe no one was after her at all. Attention passengers. A guest in car 8 has experienced a medical emergency. If there are any medical professionals on board, please proceed to car 8 to assist. The announcement crackled over the intercom. Chloe's heart jumped. She saw the man in the suit stand up and walk quickly toward the end of the car. But he wasn't going forward toward the supposed emergency. He was going backward toward cars 9 and 10. Something was wrong. Chloe closed her laptop and stood up. She didn't follow him. Instead, she walked in the opposite direction toward the cafe car in car 7. It was something her father had taught her. When you're unsure where the danger is, move toward a more crowded, open space. The cafe car was mostly empty. Chloe found a seat against a wall and ordered coffee. Under the table, she discreetly opened her phone and sent her father a location pin. Onacella, 2151. Somewhere in Delaware now. All clear so far. He replied almost instantly. Stay alert. I'll meet you at the next station. The next station? Chloe was confused. How did her father know she was on the train? And how could he possibly? Her phone screen went black. The battery wasn't dead. It was being jammed. The lights in the car flickered, and several other passengers' phones let out a burst of static. Chloe shot to her feet. At the entrance to the cafe car stood the man in the suit. He wasn't alone. With him were 2 men dressed as Amtrak conductors. But their uniforms were wrong. The buttons were on the wrong side, and they wore no ID badges. Chloe Miller, the man in the suit said with a professional smile. Your father, Frank Miller, has had a heart attack. He's in critical condition at a hospital in Wilmington. We're federal marshals, here to escort you off the train at the next stop. It was a lie, a clumsy, obvious lie, but the other passengers were already murmuring. Oh, that poor girl. She should go. Her father is dying. Chloe took a deep breath. Her father had taught her this, too. When your enemy uses a lie in a public space, the best defense is to create a bigger scene. She screamed, Help! Kidnappers! They're trying to take me. She deliberately knocked her coffee cup to the floor, where it shattered loudly. Everyone in the car turned to look. Miss, what are you talking about? The man's face hardened. We're law enforcement. We have credentials. Then call the real police. Chloe shrieked. Call the conductor. If you're real, why are you afraid of the actual train crew? The 2 fake conductors exchanged a look and lunged for her. One of them held a syringe. The needle glinted with a strange, bluish liquid. Chloe turned and ran, weaving between the tables and chairs. But the car was small, and she was quickly cornered. Help! She yelled, grabbing a bottle of hot sauce from table and hurling it at them. They're trying to drug me. My father was a DEA agent. This is their revenge. That sentence hit the car like a bomb. Dad. Drugs. Somebody call 911. Get the conductor. Several male passengers stood up, forming a barrier in front of Chloe. The man in the suit, realizing his plan had failed, shot Chloe a look of pure hatred, then turned and fled with his accomplices. Chloe collapsed onto a seat, shaking uncontrollably. Only now did she understand. Her father was right. These people didn't just want to hurt her. They wanted to destroy her in the most horrific way imaginable. The rail train conductor and Amtrak police arrived 5 minutes later. But the men were gone. They had jumped off the train at the Wilmington station and vanished into the crowd. Chloe was escorted to the conductor's office. She borrowed an officer's phone to call her father. Dad, she started, and then the tears came. I'm so sorry, I didn't listen. They really came for me. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. So long. Chloe thought the call had dropped. Chloe. Her father's voice was unnervingly calm. You did good. Better than I ever could have imagined. Now listen to me. The train's next stop is Baltimore. I will meet you there. Until then, do not leave the sight of the police. Don't accept food or drink from anyone, and do not. His words were cut off. Through the phone, Chloe heard the screech of tires, the crunch of metal, and then gunshots. Dad? Dad, what's happening? The line went dead. Part 8. High-Speed Showdown. Frank was indeed on his way to meet her, but he wasn't on a train or a plane. He was behind the wheel of a rented sedan, speeding down I-95. On the passenger seat beside him was the metal lockbox. The gun was loaded. He had known Chloe would disobey him. She was too much like him, too stubborn. So he didn't try to stop her. He played along. If his daughter was the bait, he would be the one waiting in the shadows to spring the trap. But he never expected the predators to be so big or so vicious. He was about 50 miles from Baltimore when he realized he was being tailed. It wasn't just one car, it was three, a black SUV in front and two sedans behind, boxing him in. He slammed on the accelerator, pushing the car from 75 to over 100 miles per hour. The cars behind him matched his speed effortlessly. That's when his phone rang. It was Chloe, her voice choked with tears. Frank's heart clenched, but his training took over. He had to stay calm. "Chloe, you did good. I'll meet you in Baltimore." He never finished the sentence. The SUV in front of him slammed on its brakes. Frank wrenched the steering wheel, but it was too late. The sedan spun out of control and smashed into the guardrail. The airbag deployed, and the impact sent a shockwave through his body, momentarily blacking out his vision. But he wasn't unconscious. 20 years of instinct roared back to life. He kicked open the driver's side door, rolled out onto the pavement, and drew his pistol in one fluid motion. Gunshots erupted. Not from his gun, from the SUV. Bullets sparked against the car door he was using for cover. Crouching behind the wreckage, Frank assessed the situation. 3 cars, at least 6 hostiles. And they were professionals. Their movements were clean. Their coordination was seamless. Were they Elgato's old crew? Or Thorne's men? It didn't matter. All that mattered was that he had to get to Baltimore. He had to get to his daughter. He took a deep breath, darted out from behind the car, and fired 3 rounds. The first blew out the SUV's front tire. The second hit the driver's side window, bulletproof glass, but it spiderwebbed. The third caught a gunman trying to flank him, hitting him in the leg. A scream pierced the air. They hadn't expected the old security guard to be a marksman. "Agent Miller, 20 years, and you haven't lost your touch." A voice called out from behind the SUV. Frank's body went rigid. He knew that voice. Rico. A man in his 50s stepped out. He was bald, with a nasty scar running from his eyebrow to the corner of his mouth. Frank remembered that face. Rico, El Gato Stop Lieutenant, a ghost from that bloody battle on the border. Surprised? Rico grinned, showing a set of yellowed teeth. "I was surprised too. The famous Frank Miller, working as a doorman in New York. If it wasn't for those 2 idiots you busted 3 months ago, we never would have found you. You've been looking for me?" Frank kept his gun trained on him. "For 20 years, Rico's eyes turned cold. "Elgato was my brother. That bullet you put in his head didn't just kill him. It destroyed my family's business. Do you have any idea what my life has been like for the last 2 decades? Hiding, running, living like a dog." He raised a submachine gun. "Today, I settled the score." Frank knew he couldn't win a direct firefight. They had him outnumbered and outgunned. His only advantage was the location, a busy interstate highway. The police would be here any minute. He needed to stall. "Rico, I killed your brother. But do you know what he said to me before he died?" Rico hesitative. "What?" he said. Frank began, slowly shifting his position. "Tell Rico not to seek revenge. This path only leads to hell." "Lies." Rico roared. "My brother would never say that." "He did." Frank's voice was hauntingly calm. "Because he finally understood how many lives your business destroyed. Do you know how many families that shipment would have ruined? 3,000? 5,000? In his last moments, your brother understood. He wanted you to stop." "Shut up." Rico opened fire, a stream of bullets chewing up the asphalt around Frank's cover. This was his chance. Frank rolled out from the other side of the car and fired 2 shots at the rocky embankment on the far side of the highway. Not at the men, but at the loose rocks above. A mini landslide of stone and dirt tumbled down onto the road. In the ensuing chaos, he sprinted for the guardrail and vaulted over it. It was a 30-foot drop to a farmer's field below. Frank tucked and rolled as he landed, but a sharp, agonizing pain shot up his left leg. A fracture, most likely. He grit his teeth, scrambled to his feet, and limped into a dense cornfield. Behind him, he heard Rico's furious screams and more gunshots. But they wouldn't follow him down. The wail of police sirens was already growing closer. Frank ran through the cornstalks, the pain in his leg nearly making him pass out. But he couldn't stop. His daughter was waiting. She was the target. He pulled out his phone. The screen was shattered, but it still worked. He dialed a number he hadn't called in 20 years. A gruff, powerful voice answered on the first ring. Yes. General, it's me. Frank Miller. He gasped, struggling for breath. I need your help. Right now. Part 9. The final showdown at Union Station. Under police escort, Chloe got off the train at Washington, D.C. Union Station. The platform was packed with people. She stuck close to the Amtrak officer, her eyes darting around, scanning every face that came near. Her father had said he would meet her, but that phone call, she couldn't bear to think about it. Miss Miller, we've contacted the D.C. Metro Police. They're going to escort you. The officer's words ended in a choked grunt as he collapsed to the ground. Standing behind him was the man in the suit from the train, holding a taser. We meet again, he sneered. No cafe card to save you this time. Chloe turned to run, but both ends of the platform were blocked. The two fake conductors were there, along with several other men. They had her trapped. The surrounding travelers saw what was happening and backed away in fear. Someone tried to pull out a phone, but one of the men flashed a knife, and they retreated. You wouldn't dare not hear. Chloe's voice shook, but she held her ground. There are cameras everywhere. The police will be here any second. Cameras? The man in the suit pointed to the ceiling. Apologies, but the surveillance system for this section of the platform is having a technical issue. As for the police, by the time they get here, you'll be in the back of a van on your way to a shipping container bound for Southeast Asia. Don't worry, a pretty college girl like you fetches a high price over there. A wave of pure terror washed over Chloe. This was their plan, to not just kill her, but to utterly erase her, to break her father in the cruelest way imaginable. She was backed up to the edge of the platform. Behind her was the track. In the distance, the lights of an approaching train grew larger. Go on, jump, the man taunted. It would be a cleaner end than what we have planned for you. Chloe closed her eyes. She saw her father's face, her mother's. Her whole life, just beginning, about to be extinguished. Chloe, get down. A familiar voice boomed across the station. On pure instinct, Chloe dropped to the ground and covered her head. The next second, the air was filled with the sound of gunfire. Not just one shot, but a rapid, disciplined volley. It wasn't coming from the men surrounding her. It was coming from the emergency exits on both sides of the platform. A dozen figures in black tactical gear swarmed onto the platform, moving with the speed and precision of predators. Before the man in the suit and his crew could even react, they were tackled, disarmed, and handcuffed. The entire operation took less than 30 seconds. Chloe stared in shock. A figure limped toward her through the smoke. Dad! She burst into tears and threw herself into her father's arms. Frank held her tight. His left leg was crudely bandaged, but blood was soaking through. His face was scraped, his clothes were torn, but his eyes were blazing. I'm sorry I'm late, kiddo, he said, his voice hoarse. But I promised I'd come get you. Your leg. It's just a fracture, he said, as if it were a minor inconvenience. What matters is that you're safe. An elderly man in a decorated military uniform walked toward them. The stars on his shoulders identified him as a general. His hair was white, but he stood ramrod straight, his eyes sharp and clear. General, Frank said, trying to salute, but the man stopped him. Save it, Frank. You look like you've been through a war, the general said, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration. 20 years, and you're still a reckless son of a bitch. Jumping off a highway overpass? Do you have any idea how stupidly dangerous that was? I was out of options, Frank replied with a wry smile. The general nodded, then turned to Chloe. You must be Chloe. You've had quite a day. I'm General Hayes, an old commander of your father's. 20 years ago, I was the one who signed his retirement papers. Today, I was the one who got to bring him back into the fold. Chloe stared from the general to her father, a dawning realization on her face. Her father's world was so much bigger, so much more dangerous, and so much more honorable than she had ever known. Sir, what about Marcus Thorne? Frank asked. In federal custody, the general said flatly. The information you gave us was the key. We followed the thread and didn't just round up Rico's crew. We unraveled Thorne's entire 2-decade-long drug trafficking network. The DOJ has formed a special task force. We're tearing it out by the roots. Frank let out a long, slow breath. The nightmare was finally ending. By the way, the general added, there's been a development in the Leo Vance case. The $50,000 he was paid didn't come directly from Thorne. It was funneled through an offshore account controlled by Rico. The whole online harassment campaign was part of their revenge plot from the very beginning. Chloe gasped. It had all been a trap, right from that first moment in Times Square. If her father hadn't been so vigilant, if he hadn't had this secret past. She shuddered to think of what might have happened. Dad, she asked quietly, is it always going to be like this? Frank looked at his daughter, then at the general, and a genuine smile touched his lips. No, he said, it's not, because I've decided I'm done being a security guard. What are you going to do? Frank and the general shared a look. He's going to be a special consultant to the DEA, the general answered for him. He'll be in charge of cleaning up the remnants of the El Gato and Marcus Thorne syndicates. The pay isn't great, but it comes with a firearm, a security detail, and a nice apartment in a secure government complex in D.C., which should be convenient for your grad school applications. Chloe was speechless. The turn of events was staggering. But Dad, your leg. Your father once took a bullet to the gut and still chased a suspect for 2 miles. A little fracture is nothing, the general said, clapping Frank on the shoulder. 3 months of physical therapy, and he'll be good as new. So, Frank, do you accept the offer? Frank didn't answer right away. He looked at his daughter, at the cartel thugs being led away in cuffs, and at the next train pulling into the station. 20 years ago, he had put down his gun because he was tired of the violence. 20 years later, he realized he had been wrong. Some fights don't end just because you walk away. They just change their tactics and come back stronger. And if you can't walk away, you run toward the fight. I accept, Frank said, his voice quiet but firm. On 2 conditions. Name them. First, my wife, Sarah. She's been a nurse in New York for 20 years. She shouldn't have her life upended because of me. Done. The head administrator position at Walter Reed Medical Center just opened up. It's hers if she wants it. Second, Frank looked at his daughter. Chloe's safety must be guaranteed. Highest priority. The general smiled. You even have to ask? The security at the DOJ family residences is second only to the White House. Chloe looked at her father, and she was crying and smiling at the same time. This stubborn, silent man who kept everything buried inside was finally, after all these years, going to be himself again. On the platform, the tactical team was clearing the area. As Rico was led past, he glared at Frank. You think you've won? He hissed. Our network is global. You can't catch us all. As long as people want drugs, people like us will exist. Frank looked at him calmly. Your brother said something similar 20 years ago, he replied. He said addiction is human nature, and you can't change human nature. I told him he was wrong. He paused. Addiction isn't human nature. It's a disease, and my job is to treat that disease. One dealer at a time, 1 year at a time, 1 generation at a time, until there are no more parents who lose their children to this poison, and no more children who lose their futures. Rico was dragged away, still cursing. General Hayes put a hand on Frank's shoulder. Come on, there's an ambulance waiting for you. We need to get that leg looked at, and your daughter needs a full checkup. Frank nodded. Supported by his daughter, he limped toward the station exit. The evening sun cast a golden glow across the grand architecture of Union Station. Another train arrived, bringing with it new people, new stories. And Frank Miller's story, after lying dormant for 20 years, was finally beginning a new chapter. This time, he would not be fighting alone. Epilogue. 3 months later, Washington, D.C. DEA headquarters. Frank Miller, walking with only a slight limp, entered the auditorium with his daughter. Today was his official appointment ceremony and a press conference announcing the conclusion of the international drug trafficking case against the Thorne El Gato syndicate. The room was full. Old colleagues from his DEA days, new agents, reporters, and Sarah. She sat in the front row, dressed in a smart suit, her eyes glistening with pride. On stage, General Hayes was speaking. Frank Miller's 2 decades of quiet integrity are a testament to the fact that a hero's character never fades. From the front lines of a drug war to a security post in Times Square, from facing down online mobs to fighting for his life, he has never wavered from the side of justice. Frank wasn't really listening. His gaze swept over the young faces in the audience. The new class of DEA recruits, all of them under 25. He saw fire in their eyes that he recognized from his own youth. And now, I'd like to welcome Special Consultant Frank Miller to the stage. The applause was thunderous. Frank walked steadily to the podium. The room fell silent. He stood there for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Then he spoke, his voice clear and strong. 3 months ago, I was a security guard in Times Square. An internet celebrity tried to provoke me, to turn a digital mob on me. At the time, I wondered, what has happened to our world? Why is the person trying to maintain order the one who gets attacked? He paused. Then I realized the world hasn't changed. The fight has just changed its form. 20 years ago, the enemy carried guns. Today, they carry smartphones. They weaponize fame. They exploit human weakness. But their goal is the same: to create chaos, to mock the law, and to prove that evil can triumph over good. The auditorium was silent as a tomb. Today, I put this badge on again, Frank said, touching the credentials clipped to his suit jacket. Not to prove a point, but to send a message to those still lurking in the shadows. You didn't win 20 years ago. You will not win today, and you will never, ever win. The applause that followed was deafening. Frank raised his hand in a crisp, formal salute. The scar on his forehead was clearly visible under the stage lights, like a medal that could never be taken off. After the ceremony, Chloe walked with her father out of the building. "Dad, Mom's making a pot roast tonight to celebrate your first day back on the job." Frank smiled. "Good, but I need to make a stop first." "Where?" "The Lincoln Memorial," he said, looking out toward the National Mall. "I want to watch the sunset. It's been a long time." Father and daughter walked out into the crisp autumn air of Washington, D.C. The streets were filled with people, each with their own life, their own story. And Frank Miller's story, at the age of 52, was starting over. This time, there was no hiding, no running away. He would stand in the light, a living testament to the truth that justice may be delayed, but it is never denied. A hero may grow old, but his spirit is ageless. In the distance, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery strokes of red and gold over the silhouette of the memorial. It looked like a flame, burning brightly in the heart of anyone who took the time to look up.